Hello, we're Team Halo, and this is our 2D platformer game, The World Below. As you can see, when you launch the game, it takes you straight into the main menu with options for single player, multiplayer, and load game. All the controls are reactive when you hover over them as sort of player feedback. And if I just go into single player, I'm not sure if you heard there was a click sound there, click sound on all the controls. This takes us into the intro video and starts a new game. The game is based on the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, as you may remember. And there's a fair emphasis on storyline and dialogue and atmosphere, hence the quite dramatic music at points. And that's where our AI has been incorporated into the dialogue at the end of each level. We'll go over that when we reach that point. But the general outline of the story is you are playing the character of Orpheus, who's gone down into the underworld to rescue his wife Eurydice, and using his great skill with a lyre, he's using music to calm down Cerberus, who guards the underworld, and Hades. And Hades has just agreed to allow you to take your wife back to the world of the living as long as you don't look back, and that's where our game begins. The game's largely inspired by existing platformers, particularly more retro ones like Super Mario, so there's no health system or lives. It's just a straight up, if you collide with an enemy or if you fall, the level will restart. So you control your character with W and D, and also spacebar for the calm mechanic, which I'll discuss later. And if you try and go back with A, the level will also restart. Sort of call back to the story, the idea that you can't look back, and it's been incorporated into level design with things like dead ends and quite difficult to time jumps where you're unable to sort of adjust your position by moving backwards. So if I just go ahead and press the skip button, that will take us to the title screen for level 1, and just after that the tutorial screen opens up, which gives you some basic instructions on how to play the game. You can press continue or press spacebar as well to go past that, because spacebar is used quite frequently. We thought that's where the player's hands will already be resting, so that can be used for most of the dialogues, just giving a few options in terms of human-computer interaction. And as you saw just there, colliding with the enemy restarted the level. There's falling as well, restarting the level. Control your character with the W, D, and spacebar keys, as I said earlier, and there I just pressed A to try and go backwards, which again restarts the level. So the next thing I'll talk about is the calm mechanic, which is basically our substitution for attacking or jumping on enemies like you do in most platformers. Rather than doing that, you can play the lyre, or basically play music near enemies to calm them. So again, taking inspiration from the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. And how it works is every enemy has a calm distance, so harder enemies have a smaller calm distance, and if you press spacebar outside of that distance, you just produce colourful particles to represent playing music, and if you're within an enemy's calm distance, some of those particles will be white to let the player know that they're close enough to begin calming an enemy. And from there, every time the spacebar is pressed, the enemy's aggro level will be decreased by 1. Harder enemies have higher aggro levels, so you need to spend longer calming them. And when their aggro level reaches 1, their movement will slow down, so you can very easily just jump over them at that point if you want, or you can calm them a bit more and they will stop moving and you can walk through them without colliding or restarting the level. So to finish the level, you just need to reach the yellow square at the end, as you just saw there, and that opens up some dialogue from Hades, which generally explains your progress through the underworld, where you are, and asks a question about your journey or how you're feeling, which you can reply to with anything you want. So unlike most games where you get a limited selection of replies, in this, we're using sentiment analysis to classify the sentiment of the player's response as positive, negative, or neutral, and Hades will reply appropriately, and then the next level will be adjusted with stronger and faster or less strong enemies depending on whether Hades likes your response or not. So depending on the question, you may want to respond in a positive way or a negative way, and that makes a difference to the gameplay. So the actual impact this has on enemies is that if you give a response that displeases or disappoints Hades, enemies will have a higher aggro level, so they'll need more calming to be fully calmed, and they'll also have a higher move speed, which makes them harder to just jump over or land next to if they're covering a platform. In terms of the actual AI behind this, We used a naive Bayes machine learning model with a very large amount of data. So there's 2 data sets of tweets, one's of airline tweets and one's of general tweets. And those were chosen because they're character limited and they're natural language, quite casual language, so the sort of things that we'd expect people to use as responses in the game. And across both the data sets, there's just under 800,000 classified messages. And each of those contains multiple words, of course, and each of those words acts as a data point. So you've got the word and the sentiment of the message that it appeared in, and then we basically just going through the frequencies that each of those words appears in each type of message. And because we've got literally millions of data points, the AI is actually impressively accurate despite its simplicity. So the final AI model has a 71.25% accuracy rate. We did actually achieve a slightly higher accuracy. I think it was 72.4, so only marginal. But when we were tuning the hyperparameters, rather than maximizing accuracy, we're actually trying to minimize average difference, which is something I explain and go over more in the report. This is the menu that comes up if you press escape while playing. So you can see there's options to resume, save, quit, and control the music. You can see that if I press the volume icon, it mutes the music, and if I click it again, it starts again. So I can resume the game, I can reopen the menu. If I go to save and try and save a new game, you can see that the text field defaults to Harry. That's because I loaded a game called Harry. So it defaults to whatever save game you loaded. If you started a new game, that would just be blank. So I can save that game and then just carry on playing. Annoyingly, I had quite a lot of issues with the recording software I've been using, and so I've switched to this other one, but unfortunately the cursor doesn't show up in this. If we just go into the load game, the first thing that you can see here is that the player name is displayed most prominently to make saves really easy to find, and then just under that it shows the level of that save. You've got left and right arrows which fade slightly as you hover over, and there's a delete button at the bottom, and if I click that it will remove the save and just start displaying the next one if there is one, and if not it will say display the previous save or no saved games if there aren't any, at which point all the arrows will be removed as well. You might have noticed the name of the save I just loaded is Achilles. There's a little Easter egg which is also sort of a developer mode where if you name a save Achilles, your character becomes invincible to enemies. It can still restart the level by falling or pressing A, but you're immune to enemies, which makes it really good for testing levels, or it's just a fun Easter egg for the player. As you saw just then, I was able to jump once in the air. That's a feature I like to call air hopping. You get one jump in between touching a platform, so you can jump from one platform to another. But if you start falling, you can jump once in midair as well. And there are several points in the levels where you have to start falling and jump either to get extra distance or to move up and under a platform that's sticking downwards. Then there's clambering, which is where if a player just misses the top of the pillar and lands near the top at the side, they can jump onto the pillar. So this only works if the player is right at the top of the pillar. And it was originally a bug, but it turned out to be quite a fun feature, so we integrated it into level design, as you can see here. The little square just behind the player represents Eurydice, and she's got a basic function to control her vertical movement, so she's not just statically following the player, but she's not distracting either. And because of the way it works, when you fall, her spirit sort of gets pulled up away from you, which is quite nice. In terms of enemies, there's 4 main types, and also water as an environmental hazard, although it functions fairly similarly to the enemies. It inherits from the enemy class. So there's the first enemy, which is the standard green one, which is quite easy to calm and moves fairly slowly. And then second and third ones move increasingly quickly and are harder to calm. They have a higher initial aggro level. And the third of these is also quite a dark colour, so it can be harder to see as well. And then lastly, there's a boss enemy called Nyx, which is much taller. She's the Greek goddess of the night, in case you're wondering. And she's a sort of reoccurring boss. She first appears in level 7, and she speaks to you in the end dialogue a couple of times. And then finally in level 10 she appears several times in much more difficult circumstances when there are other enemies around and different platforms you've got to jump around, and she's quite difficult to avoid because she's invisible until she gets really close to the player. She's effectively impossible to calm because she has an aggro of about 9,000, so if you just stood there spamming the spacebar you could theoretically get past her that way, but realistically you need to jump over her, which is quite difficult to do because she moves very far and very fast, and as I said, she's invisible until she's close to the player. So that kind of gives the illusion of her rushing the player and chasing them, which is quite a nice effect. Then once you reach the end of level 10 and you hit the last flag, it opens up the outro video, which I'll just play for you now. It also has all the credits and attributions. As you probably saw earlier, there is a multiplayer mode option in the main menu, and we did plan a co-op mode where a second player would get to control Eurydice, but unfortunately, although we managed to get a lot of the networking for that done, so we can send packages from player to player, and we couldn't get that to translate into a full co-op mode, and we didn't get that implemented in time. We did leave the option in the menu though, just to sort of signal what our original intention was and to leave it open for future development. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed that demo. Sorry I didn't sound incredibly enthusiastic, certainly not as enthusiastic as I feel. Unfortunately, I've got a bit of a sore throat. Luckily, it's not corona, I hope. But in all seriousness, this is something we are really proud to have produced. It is genuinely fun to play, and it's definitely something I'll show off to my friends and play myself. And I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. Thank you very much for watching.